The wolves came down from the ridge just after dusk. Ethan Callahan had heard them before he saw them, the low, hungry howls carrying across the frozen timber. The sound had a way of tightening a man's chest, of reminding him he was not the only predator in the wilderness. He set down his axe, brushed the sawdust from his coat, and reached for his rifle leaning against the cabin doorframe. The evening was clear, the snow crisp under his boots as he stepped out into the chill. A pale moon hung low, bathing the forest in silver light. That's when he saw them. Not the wolves, at least not first. It was the girl. A tiny figure, no more than 6 years old, stumbling through the snow with her arms wrapped around a ragged doll. Behind her, a woman struggled to keep up, her long dark braid loose against her shawl. And behind them, shadows moved, sleek, gray bodies gliding silently along the tree line. Wolves, 6 at least, circling. Ethan didn't think. He fired a shot into the air. The boom split the night, scattering birds from the trees. The wolves hesitated, glowing eyes fixed on him, teeth bared in white snarls. "Run!" he shouted to the woman, motioning them toward his cabin. She clutched the girl's hand, dragging her forward, stumbling in the deep snow. Ethan leveled his rifle again, took aim at the boldest wolf that had crept too close, and squeezed the trigger. The crack echoed, and the beast yelped, limping back into the dark. The rest of the pack slunk into the shadows, but their howls promised they would not go far. By the time the woman reached him, she was out of breath, cheeks flushed with cold. The little girl clung to her skirts, wide-eyed and silent. Ethan opened the cabin door with one arm, urging them inside. Quickly! Before they circle back. The warmth of the fire hit them the moment they stepped in. Ethan bolted the door, then set his rifle aside. The woman collapsed onto the nearest chair, clutching the girl to her chest. Her lips moved as though in prayer, words Ethan didn't understand, but the tone was unmistakable, relief, gratitude, and trembling fear. He crouched beside them. "You're safe now," he said softly. "They won't get through these walls." The little girl peeked at him then, eyes dark as polished stone. She whispered something to her mother in a language Ethan didn't recognize. The woman stroked her hair, nodding, before turning her gaze to him. Her voice was accented, careful. "Thank you, sir." Ethan dipped his head. "Name's Callahan. Ethan Callahan. You're lucky I was out here tonight. Wolves don't usually come this close to the clearing." She hesitated, then spoke. "My name is Mei Lin. This is my daughter, Lien." The girl ducked shyly behind her mother's arm. Ethan smiled faintly. "Pretty name. Both of you are half frozen. Let me fetch some blankets." He pulled 2 thick wool blankets from the trunk near his bed and draped them around their shoulders. Mei Lin's fingers trembled as she clutched the fabric close. The firelight painted her face in warm tones, softening the hard edges of exhaustion. Her dark eyes met his only briefly before flicking away. "Where were you headed?" Ethan asked as he set a pot of water on the stove. Mei Lin lowered her gaze. "Away," she said simply. That wasn't much of an answer, but Ethan didn't press. Instead, he poured them each a tin cup of hot tea, sweetened with the last of his honey. The girl sipped eagerly, her small hands wrapped around the cup, while Mei Lin took hers more cautiously. For a while, the only sound was the crackle of the fire and the distant, haunting howl of wolves still roaming the timber. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "You'll stay here tonight. It's not safe out there." Mei Lin nodded once, though he caught the flicker of hesitation in her eyes, like she wasn't sure she should trust him. He understood. Out here, trust was rarer than gold. The cabin was modest. 1 room, rough-hewn logs, shelves lined with tools, jars of dried beans and flour. A single bed stood in the corner, neatly made. Ethan rolled out his spare bedroll near the fire. "You and the girl take the bed," he said. Mei Lin shook her head quickly. "No. We cannot. You can, Ethan cut in firmly. The child needs rest. Wolves won't trouble us here. Her lips parted as if to argue, but then she glanced at her daughter, who was already nodding off, curled up under the blanket. With a soft sigh, Mei Lin gathered the child in her arms and laid her on the bed. For a long while, she sat at the edge, watching her daughter's chest rise and fall in peaceful sleep. Ethan studied her quietly, noting the way her hands smoothed the blanket as though to reassure herself the girl was truly safe. "Where's her father?" Ethan asked gently. The question made her still. Her fingers froze mid-motion, and her eyes glistened in the firelight. When she spoke, her voice was hushed. "Gone. Long time." Ethan nodded slowly, sensing the weight behind her words. He didn't ask more. Outside, the wolves howled again, closer this time. Lien stirred, whimpering, and Mei Lin immediately soothed her, murmuring in soft Mandarin until the girl drifted back to sleep. Ethan rose, stoked the fire, then leaned against the wall, rifle resting across his lap. He'd keep watch, just in case the wolves grew bold again. Mei Lin turned her gaze to him after a long silence. "Why you help us?" He met her eyes steadily. "Because you needed it. That's reason enough." She looked away quickly, but not before he saw something flash across her face. Surprise, maybe even relief. Ethan said nothing more. The night was long, but his cabin stood strong. And for the first time in years, it didn't feel quite so empty. The sun rose pale and cold over the ridge, brushing the snow with faint gold. Ethan had barely slept. He'd kept his rifle across his knees through most of the night, listening to the wolves prowl just beyond the timberline. By dawn, their cries had faded into silence. Inside, the cabin smelled of wood smoke and porridge. Ethan stirred the pot while Mei Lin folded the bedroll and tucked the blankets neatly back into the chest. She moved quietly, careful not to wake Lien, who still slept curled like a kitten beneath the quilt. "You didn't need to do that," Ethan said, nodding toward the folded bedding. Mei Lin's hands paused, then lowered. "I must repay." "You don't owe me," he said firmly, setting bowls on the table. "A man doesn't ask payment for saving lives." Her eyes lingered on him, unreadable, before she turned back to the bed where her daughter stirred. Lien blinked sleepily, rubbed her eyes, and smiled when she spotted Ethan. "Good morning, little one," he said with a faint grin. She whispered something in Mandarin, tugging at her mother's sleeve. Mei Lin translated softly. "She says, you are like strong mountain." Ethan chuckled under his breath. "Well, that's a first." The small moment of warmth didn't last long. By the time the porridge bowls were half empty, Ethan heard the crunch of boots in snow. Not one pair. Many. He stiffened, set his spoon down, and rose. Outside, men's voices carried low and grim. Mei Lin noticed the change in his face. "What is it?" "Stay here," Ethan said sharply. He grabbed his rifle and strode to the door. When he pulled it open, a dozen settlers stood in the clearing. Farmers, trappers, men he recognized from town. Their breath smoked in the morning air, and their faces were hard. Some carried rifles, others axes. "Callahan," one of them said, stepping forward. He was a broad man named Jeb Carter, known for stirring trouble where none was needed. "Word got round you've taken in strangers." Ethan's jaw tightened. "What of it?" Carter spat into the snow. "You know damn well what. We don't need more mouths to feed, especially not her kind." He jerked his chin toward the cabin. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. Ethan's grip on the rifle tightened. "She's got a child. They were near torn apart by wolves last night. They'll stay here until they're safe." "You don't get to decide for the rest of us," another man spoke up. "Chinamen brought here for rail work are trouble enough. We ain't about to let one squat in our settlement." Anger sparked in Ethan's chest, hot and immediate. She's not squatting. She's breathing. There's a difference. Behind him, the door creaked. Mei Lin had stepped out, her daughter clutching her skirts. Fear shadowed her face, but her spine was straight, her chin lifted. The settler's eyes narrowed at the sight. Lien whimpered, hiding her face against her mother's legs. "See there," Carter said, voice rising. "You bring trouble to your own doorstep, Callahan. Next thing, we'll have every drifter and foreigner hiding in our woods. We won't stand for it." Ethan raised his rifle, not aiming, but firm enough that the men noticed. "You'll stand where you are, and you'll leave them be." Tension cracked like ice between them. Several settlers shifted, uneasy. A few lowered their eyes, shamed by the sight of the frightened child clinging to her mother. But Carter wasn't moved. His face reddened. "You'll choose, Callahan," he barked. "Them or us. If you side with outsiders, don't expect our help when you need it." Ethan's voice was steady as stone. "I didn't ask for your help. And I sure as hell won't abandon a woman and child to die just so you sleep easier." A silence followed, long, heavy. Then one by one, some of the men muttered and began to back away. Not all, but enough. Carter lingered, glaring, before finally spitting into the snow again. "You'll regret this," he growled. Then he turned, stomping after the others. When the last of them disappeared into the trees, Ethan exhaled slowly and lowered his rifle. The tension drained from his shoulders, leaving a deep weariness behind. Mei Lin hadn't moved. Her eyes shimmered, her hand tight on Lien's shoulder. "They will come back," she whispered. "Maybe," Ethan admitted. He turned to face her fully. "But I won't let them touch you." For a moment, she only stared at him. Then, to his surprise, her eyes filled with tears. She blinked them away quickly, but not before he saw. Inside the cabin again, Lien clambered into Ethan's lap as though she had always belonged there. She pressed her small hand against his chest, murmuring in her language. Mei Lin translated with a trembling smile. She says, "You are her hero." Ethan swallowed hard, emotion catching in his throat. He rested a hand gently on the child's back. "She's safe here. Both of you are." That night, after Lien fell asleep, Mei Lin lingered by the fire. She sat across from Ethan, her face soft in the glow. "You risk much," she said quietly. "I'd risk more," Ethan replied, his voice rougher than he intended. "I've lived out here a long time. Alone. I never thought I'd care to share this cabin with anyone again. But when I saw you out there, with her," he shook his head. "There wasn't a choice to make." Her eyes glistened, and for the first time, she didn't look away. The silence between them wasn't heavy this time. It was warm, charged, like something alive. Slowly, carefully, Mei Lin reached across the table, her hand brushing his. Just the lightest touch, but enough to send a current through him. "She is my heart," she whispered, glancing toward her sleeping daughter. "If you keep us, you keep both." Ethan turned his hand over, letting her fingers rest in his palm. His voice was low, certain. "Then both is what I'll keep." Outside, the wind howled across the timber. But inside the cabin, for the first time in years, Ethan Callahan felt something stronger than solitude. He felt the beginning of a family.